Daniel Cameron is doing a fantastic job. I think he's a star. Mob justice is not justice. Justice sought by violence is not justice. I heard that. I said, write that down for me, please, because I think it was a terrific statement.
On the night of March 13th, 2020, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old, was tragically killed in her own home during a failed police raid. The officers, executing a search warrant tied to a drug investigation, burst into her apartment in the early hours of the morning. But the operation was plagued by errors and oversights that would ultimately cost Breonna her life. What began as an investigation into drug activity miles away from Breonna's home spiraled into one of the most controversial cases of police violence in modern American history. How did the events of that fateful night unfold so disastrously? Let's see the tragic details of Breonna Taylor's death and the aftermath that led to national outcry and calls for justice.
Junior? No, that was senior prom. Junior prom, she had the blue dress. That's junior prom. She looks so good. To know her is to love her. She's so much like me, but she's so much better than me.
Breonna Taylor was a vibrant and determined young woman whose life held immense promise. She lived in Louisville, Kentucky, and worked as an emergency medical technician. She dreamed of advancing her career in the healthcare field. Her family and friends described her as compassionate, hardworking, and deeply committed to helping others.
When I walk across that stage and get my diploma handed to me, I won't be thinking this is the end, rather more like this is only the beginning. I will now be starting my journey to the adult life.
Breonna's life was full of love and happiness, which she shared with her boyfriend named Kenneth Walker. A licensed gun owner, Kenneth provided stability and support in their committed relationship. Breonna and Kenneth lived in an apartment where they had started envisioning their future together. Their home was a place of warmth and mutual respect, which reflected the dreams and goals they shared. Breonna's family spoke of her as someone who had just begun navigating adulthood with aspirations that were abruptly stolen from her.
You ain't got a Breonna or Breonna?
She was the star of the show for the family, basically, and she just kept everybody going.
The tragedy that revealed on March 13th, 2020, began with an investigation into two men suspected of selling drugs from a house more than 10 miles away from Breonna Taylor's apartment in Louisville, Kentucky. One of these men, named Jamarcus Glover, had a history of criminal activity and had previously been in a relationship with Breonna. Although she had severed ties with him months earlier, authorities believed that Glover was using Breonna's apartment to receive drug-related packages. This assumption, unsupported by verified evidence, had led law enforcement to obtain a no-knock warrant for her home. Despite being labeled a no-knock warrant, the court later modified it to require officers to knock and announce their presence before entry. However, this critical modification was ignored during the raid. The officers involved in the operation failed to adhere to the requirement to announce themselves, which settled the stage for the tragic events that followed.
One on me. Get him one. Get Ricky in there. Ricky in. He's out. Hey, she's down at the end of the hall.
Shortly after midnight on March 13th, 2020, Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend were asleep in their Louisville apartment when they were startled awake by loud banging on their front door. Confused and alarmed, Walker called out to ask who was at the door, but received no clear response. Uncertain of the situation and fearing an intruder, possibly Breonna's ex-boyfriend, who was at the center of a drug investigation, Walker reached for his legally owned firearm to defend them. Unaware to Walker and Breonna, plainclothes officers from the Louisville Metro Police Department were executing a warrant for their apartment. Although the warrant had been modified to require the officers to knock and announce their presence, this detail was hotly disputed. The officers later claimed they had identified themselves as police before entering, but several neighbors contradicted this statement, saying they heard no such announcement. Only one witness partially supported the officers' account, though their testimony was inconsistent with that of the others.
Fatal shooting, officers were searching for Taylor's ex-boyfriend, who was suspected of dealing drugs. Authorities executing a no-knock warrant, breaking down the door of Taylor's apartment.
As the door was forcibly broken open with a battering ram, Walker, believing they were under attack, fired a single shot in self-defense. The bullet struck Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly in the leg, prompting an immediate and chaotic exchange of gunfire. In response, the officers returned fire with over 32 rounds, launching an attack into the apartment. The sheer volume of gunfire was reckless, with bullets tearing through walls and neighboring units, endangering other residents, which included a family with children. Tragically, 5 of these bullets struck Breonna, which caused her to collapse on the floor while bleeding heavily.
One on me. Get him one. Get Ricky in there. Ricky in. He's out. Hey, she's down.
The scene inside Breonna Taylor's apartment quickly spiraled into chaos after the gunfire erupted. In a panic, Kenneth Walker recalled seeing Breonna lying on the floor while struggling to breathe and coughing up blood. She had been struck by multiple bullets and her injuries were severe. Despite her clear distress and life-threatening wounds, none of the officers involved in the raid offered her medical aid. Their priority appeared to be securing the scene and attending to Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly, who had been injured in the exchange of gunfire. In what would become a critical mistake,
And so I immediately felt the pain in my leg.
Former Louisville Metro Police Sergeant John Mattingly reliving the night he was shot and seriously injured. He told us he has no disdain for Kenneth Walker, Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, who fired the gun.
Now, maybe if I'd been paralyzed.
the ambulance that was initially stationed nearby as part of the standard procedure was instructed to leave the area an hour before the raid. This decision delayed Breonna's access to medical attention. It wasn't until much later, after a call was made for medical assistance, that paramedics returned to the scene. Tragically, by that time, it was too late to save Breonna. Kenneth Walker, frantic and desperate, immediately called 911 while pleading for help as he tried to understand what had just happened. He told the operator that someone had broken into their home and shot his girlfriend.
911, Operator Harris, where is your emergency?
I don't know what's happening. Somebody kicked in the door inside my girlfriend.
But despite his urgent plea, there was a delay in the emergency response. The severity of Breonna's injuries became painfully clear, and she was ultimately declared dead at the scene. The Jefferson County coroner later confirmed that Breonna likely died within minutes of being shot. Her life extinguished before she could receive the care she needed. Her death not only shocked her family and friends, but also left the community in deep mourning as they grappled with the senseless loss of a young woman whose life was cut short due to a flawed police operation. The officers' failure to provide immediate medical assistance to Breonna highlighted another layer of tragedy in an already horrific situation.
Police body camera video showing Mattingly later getting help. Breonna Taylor would be pronounced dead inside the apartment.
She's done. We'll keep one person here on her.
The investigation that led to Breonna's apartment was riddled with inaccuracies and poor judgment. The warrant application falsely claimed that packages had been delivered to her home, a claim later disproven. Detective Kelly Goodlett, one of the officers involved, admitted to falsifying evidence to obtain the warrant. These were not minor procedural errors. They were serious lapses that directly contributed to the flawed raid.
But the U.S. Department of Justice found that warrant was written using false information. The department alleges Janes used information he knew wasn't true when writing the warrant. Meany is accused of knowing it had false information and approving it anyway.
The immediate aftermath of the raid was marked by a series of procedural failures and attempts to deflect responsibility. The initial police report listed Breonna's injuries as none and falsely claimed that no forced entry had occurred, despite the use of a battering ram. This was a deliberate misrepresentation, and the inaccuracies in the report fueled public outrage. As the case gained attention, it became evident that the police had tried to cover up their actions, further intensify the outcry for justice.
What we have seen the last couple of days here, dozens of people gathering, probably more than 100 of them last night, but the protests have been peaceful, the marches have been peaceful, and authorities are hoping that is going to continue.
In the wake of the raid, investigations revealed that no drugs were found in Breonna's apartment. Contrary to the police's justification for the raid, there was no evidence linking her to any illegal activities. The primary target of the investigation, Jamarcus Glover, was arrested on the same day in possession of drugs.
I do think it's important to increase that bond. Certainly have found Mr. Glover to be a flight risk as well as a danger to the community.
Wednesday morning, he got yet another bond added to the series of charges he's racked up.
However, he later stated that Breonna had no connection to his operations and had been entirely innocent.
Said it to you the other morning, like, I just chose to give it to God. I was carrying it all and I was getting weaker by the moment, but I had to figure out another way. I had to do something different.
This revelation deepened the sense of injustice surrounding her death, as it became clear that Breonna had been wrongly implicated in a case that led to her fatal shooting.
Oh, watch out! Moving. Move. Short. Clear. I got this back real quick. Yeah.
Public attention to Breonna Taylor's case grew in the months following her death, especially after the police killing of George Floyd in May 2020. Her name became a rallying cry in nationwide protests, with demonstrators demanding justice for victims of police brutality. They called for the officers involved in the raid to be held accountable and for significant reforms in policing. In June 2020, Brett Hankerson was fired from the Louisville Metro Police Department due to his reckless actions during the raid. He had fired 10 rounds blindly through a covered window and sliding glass door, endangering Breonna's neighbors, which included a pregnant woman and a child. Despite this, none of Hankerson's bullets hit Breonna or Walker. He was later charged with 3 counts of wanton endangerment in state court, but was acquitted in March 2022.
Stop screaming.
Don't come off that car. If you come off that car again, I'm going to put you on the ground. Please, dude, don't let her be dead. Please, God, don't let her be dead.
In September 2020, the city of Louisville reached a $12 million settlement with Breonna's family, which included a commitment to implementing police reforms.
Louisville Metro government agrees to make several important policy changes. In addition to these policy changes, this settlement includes a payment to Breonna's estate of $12 million.
These reforms required officers to wear body cameras during search warrants and established additional review processes for warrants. This settlement highlighted the widespread call for accountability, but the pursuit of justice for Breonna continued, which signaled the ongoing fight for change within the criminal justice system.
People here are not happy. They're not happy with just 3 counts of wanton endangerment for Brett Hankerson, nothing for the other officers.
A $15,000 bond for one murder. One motherfucking murder.
In August 2022, the U.S. Department of Justice announced federal charges against 4 officers involved in the Breonna Taylor case, which included Brett Hankerson, Kelly Goodlett, and 2 others. These charges included civil rights violations, unlawful conspiracies, and obstruction of justice. Goodlett pleaded guilty to falsifying the search warrant, admitting that she and another officer had fabricated evidence to obtain the warrant. Hankison faced multiple trials, both at the state and federal levels, following Breonna Taylor's death. In November 2023, during his third trial, he was convicted of violating Breonna's civil rights by using excessive force. This marked the first conviction of any officer involved in her death. Throughout the trial, Hankison argued that his actions were in self-defense, believing he was protecting his fellow officers in a dangerous situation. However, prosecutors countered that Hankison had acted recklessly by firing blindly into the apartment without identifying a target, which endangered innocent lives.
But the SWAT team arrived seconds after that had happened, or seconds after we had got him in handcuffs, and that the patrol officer took Mr. Walker to a car. I couldn't confirm that, and I wasn't in a position to go in and confirm or get medical treatment.
The conviction was a notable moment in a case that had sparked national protests and calls for police reform. It highlighted the legal accountability for excessive force, but also brought to the forefront the broader issues surrounding the raid. Many questioned why other officers had not been held accountable, and these unresolved issues fueled national debates on policing and systemic injustice. The case underscored the urgent need for reform in law enforcement practices, focusing on transparency, accountability, and better safeguards to prevent similar incidents from happening in the future.
Into the streets after the grand jury decision in the Breonna Taylor case. Louisville under a 9 p.m. curfew, the National Guard moving in as police and protesters clashed. Similar emotions echoing in cities nationwide, from Chicago to Atlanta to New York City.
Breonna Taylor's death sparked significant changes in Louisville and across the nation. In Louisville, the city passed Breonna's Law, which banned the use of no-knock warrants and mandated that officers wear body cameras during raids. This was a direct response to the flaws exposed in her case and the call for greater accountability in law enforcement. Nationally, Breonna's story became a powerful symbol of the systemic racism and injustice faced by Black Americans, especially women, in the criminal justice system.
A Black woman was killed in her home by the agency paid for to protect and serve her. That's wrong. There is no justifying that. And it does call on us to change laws.
Advocacy groups and activists emphasize the importance of recognizing the intersectionality of race and gender, pushing for reforms to address both police brutality and discrimination. Her death reignited calls for meaningful changes in policing practices and greater transparency, setting the stage for ongoing efforts to create a fairer and more accountable criminal justice system.
They were informed that the Justice Department has charged 4 current and former Louisville Metro Police Department officers with federal crimes related to Ms. Taylor's death.
Breonna Taylor's death was a terrible mistake that showed how broken the American justice system is. Her story touched many people's hearts because it was unfair and represented the bigger problems faced by communities that are often treated unfairly. Even though some people have been held accountable, her case is still a reminder that we need to make big changes to make sure everyone is treated fairly, no matter their skin color. Breonna's name is still a powerful reminder to keep fighting for a better future.